Across the state of Florida, now bracing for what's next after Hurricane Ian.
Lives lost, homes just shredded to pieces, people scared to death. Now the state is left to pick up those pieces.
Thank you for joining us tonight for First Coast News at 5:30. I'm Heather Crawford.
And I'm Jeannie Blaylock. We're glad you're with us tonight. We have team coverage for you showing the damage and the recovery across the First Coast and across the state of Florida tonight.
And we're going to check in with our team of reporters in just a moment. But first, we want to get an update on the forecast with Chief Meteorologist Tim Deegan.
Tim, the threat to the First Coast, the big threat over now, but tell us what's next about Ian.
All right, here's Ian. Ian made landfall today just after 2 o'clock. In fact, it's inland enough to now the National Hurricane Center is calling it post-tropical Ian. And all that means is we don't think it'll regenerate into a tropical system, but it's still going to produce possibly tornadoes to its right and then flooding rains off to its west, not only in South Carolina, but most of the storminess tonight will be for our friends in North Carolina. What about here on the First Coast? Well, no surprise here, but I just wanted to verify nothing in the way of precipitation. In fact, the only long-term flood warning, you may have heard about some record flooding over central Florida. Some of that has made it as far to the north as about Willaca on the St. Johns River. Not record flooding in Duval, but well off to the south. Nonetheless, we will continue with some flooding that is tidal flooding, and we'll talk about that as we go through the weekend. So we need some drier weather. We need some drier air. Here's those lower dew points. This 32 is not working, but otherwise, again, dry air going to create some nice cool nights. That is, if you like cool weather. What about this evening at sunset as Ian heads inland over South Carolina and eventually north? 70 degrees. We'll talk more about the sloshing high tides in the St. Johns and then the weekend weather in just a few moments.
Thank you so much. St. Augustine and surrounding areas are no strangers, of course, to taking on water when powerful storms go through.
Yeah, let's head out now to On Your Side's Jessica Clark. She is out in the Davis Shores neighborhood. And Jess, I know some folks there had flooding again with Ian.
Oh, yes. Once again, they had flooding. And let me give you kind of a location understanding for you. Right over there is the water, the marsh. OK, and so water from there came up over that yard, over this street and into houses on this side of the road. To show you how high the water went, let's walk over to the side of the house and show you the watermark. The water from way over there came up to about here. We've got a trusty ruler from Sean doing work on the house. 22 inches. That's almost 2 feet right here, 22 inches. So inside, they are just ripping things out, ripping it all up. They had just redone the house. And I talked to the people who were here and they said, we're leaving. We got to just take a break mentally. They just went to walk on the beach. You know, I mean, that is just the emotional, the physical drain that is taking place with all this cleanup after the storm. So we're in Davis Shores, one of the areas that was the hardest hit as far as the water coming up from Hurricane Ian. But let's go to another neighborhood that we checked on today, and that's the Lincolnville neighborhood, also the area around Lake Maria Sanchez, where water came up as well. A lot of folks there chose not to evacuate. And one woman showed us her home. Now, the water, she says, did not get into her house, but it did get into her garage. And she was able to show us how high the water got there.
Like this is the water line here, and I think I was up to here because I moved the refrigerator up high enough, and I think this was my water line before, and then this was.
So your house made it okay? Just the garage?
Just barely.
Yeah, so you heard Nick, the photographer, ask her, so did your house make it okay? Yeah, barely. And the garage is okay, but she's cleaning out a lot because this is dirty water. I mean, you can see these are box springs here that are probably going to have to be thrown away. So many personal belongings just being taken out to the side of the curb. We've seen this over and over and over again. We continue to see this now with the water coming up in this low-lying coastal city of St. Augustine. Live in St. Augustine, Jessica Clark, First Coast News, back to you.
And that's the hard part. It's so beautiful when it's not a hurricane. All right, thank you, Jess. Well, it's almost back to business as usual for business owners in St. Augustine. On Your Side's Lou Turner shows us how one restaurant is preparing to reopen its doors.
A day later, and now its recovery is cleanup. You remember as you were watching live shots during the tropical storm that came through? Well, the sailboat. That's the end of the story. We had the saga of it banging up against the seawall, breaking free of its moorings. Did not end up in Avenida Menendez. Instead, it ended up in the riverbed, indicative of the seawall more or less holding. There was water spilling over, of course, onto the road where it was some 2-3 feet up. But now it's the story of cleaning up and getting back. You see over here at Harry's, world famous there at the bayfront, they're actually working to get open by tomorrow, believe it or not, even though they had water all the way up to their windows.
Yeah, the height that I saw, the water line came to right about here on the windows.
That's amazing.
When the tide was fully in.
So y'all did pretty good.
Yes, the wall held. Definitely way less than Matthew and Irma. So, like I said, minimal damage inside. So, I mean, like I think I said the other day, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and we got the best. So.
Traffic moving steady in a place where you would have needed kayaks instead of vehicles, motor vehicles, already. And just think how quickly it drains here in St. Augustine. Now the story is getting back to normal. From St. Augustine, I'm Lewis Turner, First Coast News, on your side.
Good to see, not as bad as Irma and Matthew for Harry's and the rest of us that enjoy that meal. Well, who will be dealing with Ian overnight tonight? We'll take a look and we'll see what it means for us here on the First Coast in just a few moments.